I'm Melissa Bailey, 33, and literally last weekend, my rep as the family's financial glue? Yeah, it totally backfired. The stability I'd worked my butt off to keep solid, paying their bills, covering Ethan's endless emergencies, blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called happy reunion dinner. My mother, with her usual icy glare, demanded I leave the house, and when I stood my ground, the room went dead silent. "You're ungrateful, Melissa," she yelled, with Ethan smirking and my dad just staring at his plate. But here's the tea. Their rejection didn't break me. It lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay with me for the most satisfying journey you'll ever hear. Looking back, it's almost unreal what I did once that fire was lit. It started with the clinking of forks against plates, the kind of sound that fills awkward silences when nobody wants to speak first. We were at my parents' house, the same dining room where I'd sat through countless lectures about my duty to the family. The table was set with Mom's good china, the kind she only brought out to impress, but the air was thick with tension. I sat across from Ethan, my 31-year-old brother, who was slouched in his chair, scrolling on his phone like he was too important to engage. Mom was at the head of the table, her lips pursed, already judging my posture. Dad, as usual, was a ghost, his eyes fixed on the mashed potatoes like they held the secrets to the universe. I'd driven 3 hours to be there, my knuckles white on the steering wheel the whole way, dreading what I knew was coming. For years, I'd been the one keeping this family afloat, paying their mortgage when Dad forgot, bailing Ethan out of his latest get-rich-quick scheme, even covering Mom's credit card bills when she overspent on her self-care splurges. I was their walking wallet, nothing more. But that night, something in me had shifted. I was tired, bone-deep, soul-crushing tired, of carrying them while they treated me like I owed them my life. Mom started in almost immediately, her voice sharp as she passed the green beans. "Melissa, you didn't bring anything for the table again," she said, her eyes narrowing. It wasn't a question. I swallowed, my throat tight, and forced a smile. "I paid for the groceries you used, Mom," I said, keeping my tone even. Ethan snorted, not even looking up from his phone. "Yeah, big whoop, Mel. You're supposed to help family?" "Supposed to." That phrase had been my cage for years. I gripped my napkin under the table, the fabric twisting in my fingers. I wanted to scream that I'd given them everything, my savings, my time, my dreams, while they gave me nothing but guilt. But I didn't. Not yet. I just sat there, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, the same way it had since I was a kid. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who got a job at 16 to help with bills while Ethan partied. I was the one who skipped college to work full-time, sending money home while Mom bragged about Ethan's potential at every family gathering. The dinner dragged on, each bite of food tasting like ash. Mom kept firing subtle jabs about my selfish career choices, about how I never made time for them. Ethan chimed in, mocking my boring life as a financial analyst, as if his string of failed ventures made him some kind of visionary. Dad stayed silent, his fork scraping the plate, avoiding my eyes. I could feel the storm building, the kind that had been brewing for years. Then it happened. Mom set her glass down with a deliberate clink, her face hardening. "Melissa, we need to talk about your attitude," she said. "You've been distant, ungrateful, and frankly, I'm done. If you can't be part of this family, you can leave." My heart stopped. Ethan looked up, his smirk widening. Dad's fork froze midair. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. I stared at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just a jab, it was an ultimatum. Leave, or keep being their doormat. My hands trembled as I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "I'm done too." I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out, their stunned silence trailing behind me. The door slammed shut, and for the first time in years I felt the spark of something new, freedom. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond, I didn't need to. That spark was growing, and I wasn't going back. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped out of their house, my breath visible in the glow of the porch light. I slid into my car, the leather seat creaking under me, and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Driving away, the rearview mirror showed their house shrinking, but the weight of their words clung to me like damp clothes. Mom's ultimatum echoed in my head. If you can't be part of this family, you can leave. And Ethan's smirk burned behind my eyes. I'd spent years being invisible to them, my sacrifices erased while they propped up Ethan like he was some prodigy. As I merged onto the highway, the hum of the engine pulling me toward home, memories of my unseen life flooded back, each one sharper than the last. I was 16 when it started, bagging groceries after school, while Ethan, 2 years younger, was too busy with basketball tryouts to work. I'd come home with aching feet, handing over my paycheck to Mom so she could cover the electric. She'd take it without a thank you, her eyes already on Ethan, bragging about his game-winning shot that never actually happened. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my hands still smelling of produce, listening to her gush, while Dad nodded along, his coffee mug hiding his face. My A's in math, my perfect attendance, they never noticed. Ethan's got potential, Mom would say, her voice warm in a way it never was for me. By 18 I was working full-time at a local accounting firm, skipping college because we couldn't afford it for me. Ethan, though? He got a car when he turned 17, paid for with my earnings. I'd watch him peel out of the driveway, music blaring, while I counted pennies to keep the heat on. Once I overheard Mom telling a neighbor, "Melissa's our rock, but Ethan's our star." My throat tightened, and I slipped out the back door, pretending I hadn't heard. I didn't cry, not then. I just kept working, kept sending money, kept being their rock. When I was 25, I landed a job as a financial analyst, a small win I was proud of. I called home, excited to share, but Mom cut me off. "That's nice, honey, but Ethan just started his new business idea, custom sneakers." I could hear her beaming through the phone. The business tanked in 3 months, and guess who bailed him out? Me, wiring $5,000 from my savings while Ethan promised to pay me back soon. He never did. At family gatherings, they'd toast Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit, while my promotion was met with a shrug. "That's what you do, Melissa," Dad said once, his voice flat. "You're reliable." Reliable. The word stung more than any insult. It meant I was expected to give, to fix, to carry them without question. I'd sit through holiday dinners, my fork pushing food around my plate, while they laughed over Ethan's latest scheme, a food truck, a crypto venture, a music career. Each failure landed on me to clean up. I'd clench my jaw, my fingers twisting the napkin under the table, nodding along to avoid a fight. But inside, I was screaming. Didn't they see me? Didn't they care that I was drowning under their weight? One memory stands out, sharp and jagged. I was 28, visiting for Thanksgiving. I'd just paid off their credit card debt, $12,000, because Mom had forgotten to budget for her spa trips. At dinner, Ethan announced he was taking a break from his latest flop, and Mom clapped like he'd won an Oscar. I waited, hoping for a mention of my help. Nothing. Just Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection, my eyes burning. "Why do I keep doing this?" I whispered to the mirror. That was the first time I felt the spark, the one that would eventually ignite. Driving now, the highway stretching dark and endless, those memories churned. Every paycheck I'd sent, every dream I'd shelved, every time I'd swallowed my hurt, it was all for them. And for what? To be called ungrateful? To be kicked out? My hands tightened on the wheel, my nails digging into my palms. I wasn't just their daughter, I was their ATM, their safety net, their servant. But that spark from the dinner, the one lit by Mom's words and Ethan's smirk, was growing. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, another text from Ethan. "You're really gonna abandon us?" I didn't pick it up. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time so was my mind. I wasn't going back to being their shadow. I was done. The highway hummed beneath my tires, the night swallowing the last glimpse of my parents' house as I drove toward my apartment. My phone sat silent now, Ethan's texts ignored. But my mind was loud with the realization that had been building for years. I wasn't just their provider. I was more. So much more. The spark from Mom's ultimatum was fanning into something fiercer, and as the miles ticked by, I let myself revisit the moment I'd started building my own life, a secret strength they'd never seen. It was 2 years ago in the quiet of my tiny studio apartment, when I decided I was done being their doormat. That decision, That aha moment changed everything. I was 31, sitting cross-legged on my worn couch, a spreadsheet open on my laptop. My bank account was nearly drained, another $3,000 sent to Ethan for his emergency car repair. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with exhaustion. I just worked a 60-hour week, my eyes burning from staring at financial reports, only to see my savings vanish into their hands. The apartment was silent except for the drip of a leaky faucet, and I remember pressing my palms to my face, whispering, "This can't be my life." That's when it hit me. I wasn't just their wallet. I was smart, capable, and done waiting for their approval. I could build something for myself. That night, I didn't sleep. I started researching, my laptop screen glowing in the dark. I'd always been good with numbers, but I'd never used it for me. I dove into personal finance blogs, investment forums, anything I could find. My hands moved fast, scribbling notes on a legal pad, terms like index funds, side hustles, financial independence. It was like waking up after years of sleepwalking. I decided then and there to stop pouring every dime into my family and start investing in myself. It felt like betrayal at first, my heart pounding with guilt. But I pushed through. I had to. The next morning, I opened a separate savings account, one they didn't know about. I set up automatic transfers, small at first, $50 a paycheck, then $100, then more. I stopped answering Ethan's late-night calls for just a quick loan. My fingers would hover over the decline button, my stomach twisting, but I'd press it anyway. I started a side hustle too, freelancing as a financial consultant for small businesses. I'd work late into the night, my coffee going cold, crafting budgets and cash flow plans for clients. Every dollar I earned went into my secret account, growing quietly, while my family thought I was still their endless ATM. The struggle was real. There were weeks I ate ramen to save every cent, my fridge bare except for condiments. I'd sit at my tiny kitchen table, the chair wobbling under me, and check my account balance, watching it climb. $5,000, then $10,000, then $20,000. Each milestone felt like a rebellion. But the guilt was relentless. Mom would call, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Melissa, we're short this month. You're not helping?" I'd grip the phone, my knuckles white, and mumble excuses. I hated lying, but I hated being used more. Ethan's texts were worse, accusations that I was selfish, that I'd changed. I'd stare at those messages, my thumb brushing the screen, fighting the urge to cave. The turning point came last year. I'd saved enough to invest in a small rental property, a duplex I found online after months of research. My hands shook as I signed the papers, the pen slipping in my sweaty grip. It was mine, my first real asset. The first tenant paid on time, and when that deposit hit my account, I sat on my couch and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. I was building something they couldn't touch. The duplex turned a profit, and I reinvested every cent, learning to leverage my skills into more opportunities. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving, quietly, in a way they'd never suspect. Now, driving home from that disastrous dinner, I felt that strength pulsing through me. My family had no idea what I'd built. They saw me as the same old Melissa, the one who'd always say yes. But I wasn't her anymore. My hands steadied on the wheel, the road ahead lit by my headlights. I'd fought for this independence, tooth and nail, and I wasn't going back. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time, come back and apologize. I let it go to voicemail, my lips curling into a small defiant smile. They didn't know it yet, but I was free. The city lights blurred past as I pulled into my apartment complex, the engine's hum fading as I turned off the car. My phone was silent now, but the weight of Mom's voicemail, "Come back and apologize," sat heavy in my chest. I grabbed my bag, the strap digging into my shoulder, and trudged up the stairs, my keys jangling in my hand. Tomorrow was the annual family dinner, a ritual I'd come to dread, and this time, it loomed larger than ever. I was on the verge of something huge, a deal that could solidify my independence, and the thought of facing their judgment again made my stomach churn. I unlocked my door, flicked on the light, and sank onto my couch, staring at the ceiling as I braced myself for what was coming. The deal was with a local real estate group. My duplex had caught their attention, and they'd reached out months ago, impressed by how I'd turned a modest investment into steady profit. I'd spent weeks preparing, my dining table buried under spreadsheets and property listings, my laptop open late into the night. We were finalizing terms tomorrow, a partnership that could fund more properties, maybe even a small portfolio. My fingers had trembled as I drafted the proposal, double-checking every figure, my coffee mug leaving rings on the pages. This wasn't just a deal. It was proof I'd built something real, something mine. But the timing couldn't be worse. The family dinner was the same night, and I knew they'd smell blood in the water after last weekend's blowout. I stood and paced my small living room, my socks scuffing the worn carpet. The dinner was at Mom and Dad's, same as always, with the same cast. Mom's sharp tongue, Ethan's entitlement, Dad's silence. I could already picture it. The table set with her good china, Ethan slouched with his phone, Mom's eyes scanning me for weaknesses. I'd been dreading it for weeks, my calendar marked with a red circle like a warning. I'd even considered skipping, but Mom's guilt trips were relentless. "It's just one night, Melissa," she'd said on the phone last month, her voice syrupy with manipulation. "Family matters." My jaw had clenched, my free hand balling into a fist. But I'd agreed. I always did. Now, though, I felt different. That spark from last weekend was still there, glowing hotter. I stopped pacing and leaned against the counter, my fingers tapping the edge. I wasn't the same Melissa who'd nod and take their jabs. I'd built a life they didn't know about. My duplex, my savings, my freelance clients. But the thought of walking into that house, their voices dripping with condescension, made my throat tighten. I pictured Ethan's smirk, Mom's lectures about responsibility, Dad's averted eyes, my hands curled, nails biting into my palms. I wanted to walk in with my head high, but doubt crept in. Could I face them without crumbling? I moved to my desk, pulling out the folder with my deal paperwork. The pages were crisp, the numbers neat, a testament to 2 years of grit. I traced a line item with my finger, projected returns 12% annually, and felt a flicker of pride. This was my leverage, my proof I didn't need them. But as I set the folder down, my eyes caught a photo on the shelf. Me, Mom, Dad, and Ethan at a picnic years ago. I was smiling, but even then my shoulders were hunched, like I was carrying their weight. I turned the frame face down, my hand lingering on the wood. I didn't want to be that girl anymore. The clock ticked toward midnight, each second pulling me closer to the dinner. I grabbed a glass of water, the cold soothing my dry throat, and sat back on the couch. My phone lit up. Another text from Ethan. "You better show tomorrow. Don't make Mom mad again." My thumb hovered over the screen, itching to reply, but I set the phone down. Let him stew. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and pictured the deal meeting instead. The handshake, the signed contract, the future I was building. It steadied me, like an anchor in the storm of their expectations. Tomorrow I'd walk into that dinner, but not as their wallet. I'd face them as me, Melissa, the woman who'd carved her own path. My fingers relaxed, the glass cool against my skin. I wasn't ready, not fully, but I was going. And I wasn't backing down. The scent of roasted chicken hit me as I stepped into my parents' house, the familiar warmth of the dining room, doing nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. My purse strap dug into my shoulder, and I adjusted it, my fingers fidgeting as I braced for the gauntlet. The family dinner was in full swing, Mom bustling in the kitchen, Ethan sprawled at the table with his phone, Dad flipping through a newspaper like it was his shield. I'd come straight from the real estate meeting, that my signed contract tucked in my bag, a quiet victory they'd never know about. But as I crossed the threshold, the weight of their expectations settled over me, and the spark I'd been nursing felt like it might flicker out under their scrutiny. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes locking onto me with that familiar mix of judgment and disappointment. "Melissa, you're late," she said, her voice clipped as if I'd failed some unspoken test. I glanced at the clock. 6:05 p.m., barely late. But I swallowed my retort, my lips pressing into a thin line. "Sorry, traffic," I mumbled, setting my purse down. Ethan didn't look up, but his lips twitched, a half smirk that made my fingers curl. Dad rustled his paper, his eyes darting to me briefly before retreating. The room felt like a stage, and I was the unwilling performer. I took my seat, the chair creaking under me, and forced my hands to rest on the table, though they itched to twist the napkin in my lap. Mom set a platter of chicken down, her movements sharp, and launched into her usual routine. Ethan's been so busy, she said, her tone warm as she passed him the potatoes. He's pitching a new app idea to investors next week. Ethan nodded, still scrolling, as if her praise was his due. I waited, my fork hovering over my plate, hoping for a shred of acknowledgement. Nothing. Just the clink of silverware and Mom's voice, now turning to me. "So Melissa, still crunching numbers?" she asked, her smile tight like she was humoring a child. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, still at the firm, just closed a big deal today actually." My voice was steady, but inside, I was screaming for her to care. She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "That's nice, but you know, Ethan's app could really put us on the map." Ethan chuckled, finally looking up. "Yeah, Mel, keep those spreadsheets tight so I can fund my next big thing." My jaw clenched, my fork digging into the chicken, the metal scraping the plate. The condescension kept coming, each jab sharper than the last. Mom asked about my little apartment, her tone implying it was a step above a cardboard box. "You should think about moving closer," she said, slicing her meat with precision. "Family needs you nearby." My fingers tightened around my glass, the condensation slick under my thumb. Nearby for what? More bills? More bailouts? I forced a smile, my teeth gritted. "I like my place," I said, but she was already talking about Ethan's visionary plans. Ethan leaned back, his chair creaking, and tossed out a backhanded compliment that stung worse than an insult. "You're so good at playing it safe, Mel," he said, his eyes glinting. "Not everyone can take risks like me." My pulse pounded, my nails biting into my palms under the table. Risks? Like blowing my money on his scams? I wanted to fling my plate at him, but I took a slow breath, my chest tight. Dad stayed silent, his newspaper a fortress, though I caught his eyes flicker toward me, almost apologetic, before he looked away. The barrage didn't stop. Mom questioned my priorities, hinting I was selfish for not visiting more. Ethan mocked my boring job, as if his string of failures made him a mogul. Each word was a needle, pricking at the confidence I'd built. My contract, my duplex, my secret strength, they didn't know any of it, and their ignorance made me feel smaller, like I was still the invisible girl handing over her paycheck. My hands trembled as I cut my food, the knife slipping slightly. I wasn't sure how much longer I could sit there, smiling through their scorn. The dining room felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with Mom's pointed remarks and Ethan's smug jabs, each one tightening the knot in my chest. My fork scraped against the plate, the sound sharp in the tense silence that followed Ethan's latest dig about my safe life. I kept my eyes down, my fingers gripping the napkin in my lap, twisting it until the fabric strained. Then Mom set her glass down with a deliberate clink, her face hardening as she leaned forward. "Melissa, we need to have a serious talk," she said, her voice low and final, like a judge delivering a verdict. I froze, my heart thudding, knowing this was no ordinary lecture. She folded her hands, her knuckles white, and fixed me with a stare that made my skin prickle. "You've been pulling away from this family for years," she began, each word measured, cutting. "You're ungrateful, selfish, and frankly, I'm done tolerating it." My breath caught, my eyes flicking to Ethan, who leaned back with a smirk, his phone finally forgotten. Dad's newspaper rustled, but he didn't look up, his shoulders hunching like he wanted to disappear. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as Mom's voice grew sharper. "You think you're above us, don't you? With your job, your little life. But family comes first, and you've failed us." I opened my mouth to protest, my lips trembling, but she held up a hand, silencing me. "No, Melissa, I've had enough. You don't contribute anymore, you don't care. You're not welcome here until you fix your attitude." My stomach dropped, the words hitting like a slap. Not welcome. She was kicking me out, not just from the house, but from the family. Ethan's smirk widened, his eyes glinting with satisfaction, like he'd won some twisted game. Dad's hands tightened on his paper, the edges crumpling, but he said nothing, his silence louder than Mom's words. My hands shook as I set my fork down, the metal clinking against the plate. "Mom, I've given you everything," I said, my voice low but steady, though it felt like my chest was caving in. "I paid your bills, your mortgage, Ethan's debts. How is that not contributing?" She scoffed, her lips curling. "Don't play the martyr. That's your duty as family. Ethan's trying to build something real, and you're just hoarding your money." Ethan nodded, leaning forward now, his voice dripping with mock pity. "Yeah, Mel, you've gotten greedy. We're struggling, and you're just sitting pretty. Struggling? I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat, bitter and raw. Struggling because they spent my money on Ethan's flops and Mom's luxuries? My nails dug into my palms, the pain grounding me as my mind raced. I'd spent years bleeding myself dry for them, and this was my reward, a public disowning. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the floor, and stood, my hands braced on the table. You don't get to rewrite history, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I've carried you all, and you've never once said thank you. Mom's face flushed, her eyes narrowing. Get out, she snapped, pointing to the door. If you can't respect this family, you don't belong here. The words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. Ethan chuckled, a low, cruel sound, while Dad's paper trembled in his hands, his eyes still down. The room spun slightly, the weight of their rejection crushing. I grabbed my purse, my fingers fumbling with the strap, and walked to the door, my steps deliberate despite the chaos in my chest. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the knob, and looked back. You'll regret this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's glare didn't waver, Ethan's smirk stayed fixed, and Dad didn't move. I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me, the cold air biting my face. My legs felt weak, but I made it to my car, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. I slid inside, the contract from today's deal still in my bag, a reminder of what I'd built. They'd thrown me out, but that spark inside me flared brighter. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The car door slammed shut, sealing me in the quiet of my own space, but my heart still pounded from Mom's final words. Get out. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles pale in the dim streetlight filtering through the windshield. The contract from the real estate deal was in my bag, a silent reminder of my triumph earlier that day, but the sting of being disowned burned hotter. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and I glanced at it, expecting another barb from Ethan. Instead, it was a voicemail from my real estate contact, Sarah. My thumb hesitated, trembling slightly before I pressed play, and her voice filled the car, calm and professional. Melissa, we just got word. The investors loved your pitch. They're doubling the funding. You're about to change the game. My breath caught, the world tilting as her words sank in. I replayed the message, my fingers clutching the phone, the screen's glow lighting up my face. Doubling the funding. My duplex, my side hustle, my years of quiet rebellion, they just paid off in a way I hadn't dared dream. The deal wasn't just a partnership now, it was a leap toward a portfolio, a future I'd built from nothing. My chest swelled, a mix of pride and disbelief, and for a moment I forgot the dinner, the rejection, the way Mom's voice had sliced through me. I set the phone down, my hands steadying, and leaned back, a small laugh escaping my lips. It felt like the universe was winking at me, right when I needed it most. But then my eyes drifted to the house, its windows glowing warmly, mocking the coldness inside. The contrast hit hard, my family casting me out while the world outside was finally seeing me. I pictured Mom's face, so sure she'd won, and Ethan's smirk, like he'd always known I'd break. My fingers tapped the steering wheel, a restless rhythm, as anger and clarity collided. They didn't know about the deal, the duplex, the accounts I'd hidden. They thought I was still their desperate, dutiful Melissa, ready to crawl back. But this voicemail, this moment, it was proof I didn't need them. I started the car, the engine's hum grounding me, but my mind kept replaying the dinner. Mom's ultimatum had been the final straw, but it was Ethan's smug, "You've gotten greedy," that twisted the knife. Greedy? For keeping what I'd earned? For daring to want a life? My jaw clenched, my teeth grinding as I pulled onto the street. The voicemail had shifted something in me, like a lock clicking open. I wasn't just the outcast anymore. I was the one with power, with options, with a future they couldn't touch. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Mom. "Don't expect us to beg." I stared at it, my thumb brushing the screen, my pulse quickening. Beg? They'd be the ones begging soon enough. I knew their finances, every late bill, every reckless purchase, every cent I'd covered. Without me, their house of cards would collapse. My fingers tightened around the phone, then relaxed as I set it down, unanswered. Let them think they'd won. Let them stew in their victory. I merged onto the highway, the city lights stretching out before me, each one a reminder of what I'd built. I thought back to the meeting earlier, shaking hands with Sarah and the investors, my voice steady as I presented my numbers. They'd listened, nodded, asked questions, not because I was someone's daughter or sister, but because I'd earned it. My hand rested on my bag, the contract's weight reassuring. This was my turning point, not just financially but emotionally. I wasn't the invisible girl anymore, not the walking wallet. I was Melissa Bailey, and I was done carrying their weight. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time that night my shoulders relaxed, the tension easing from my neck. The spark from last weekend, the one lit by their rejection, was now aflame. I didn't need their approval, their house, their family. I had me. And that was enough. The highway lights blurred as I drove away from my parents' house, Sarah's voicemail still echoing in my mind. Doubled funding, a game changer. My hands were steady on the wheel now, the contract in my bag a quiet anchor. But the dinner's wounds were raw. Mom's "Get Out" and Ethan's smirk replayed like a bad song, each loop stoking the flame inside me. I wasn't done with them, not yet. They needed to see the truth, to face the hypocrisy they'd built their lives on. My phone buzzed again, another text from Ethan. "You're gonna miss us when we're gone." My lips curled, not quite a smile, as I pulled into a gas station to clear my head. I wasn't running anymore. I was going back. I turned the car around, my pulse quickening, the tires humming against the pavement. The house was only 10 minutes away, and as I drove, I rehearsed what I'd say, my fingers tapping the steering wheel in a restless rhythm. They thought they'd broken me. But they didn't know the Melissa I'd become. The one who'd built a duplex, a business, a life without their leash. The contract in my bag was proof, but this wasn't about bragging. It was about exposing them, about walking away on my terms. I pulled into their driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and cut the engine. The house looked the same, warm lights, perfect lawn, but it felt like a stage for their lies. I grabbed my bag, the contract's weight grounding me, and marched to the door. My knuckles rapped sharply, the sound cutting through the quiet night. Mom opened it, her face tightening when she saw me. "What do you want, Melissa?" she asked, her voice cold, arms crossed. Ethan appeared behind her, his smirk faltering, and Dad hovered in the background, his newspaper gone, but his eyes still avoiding mine. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my boots clicking on the hardwood. "We're not done," I said, my voice calm but firm, like I was presenting to the investors. Mom's eyes narrowed, but I didn't flinch. I set my bag on the dining table, the plates still scattered from dinner, and faced them. "You called me selfish, ungrateful," I started, my hands steady at my sides. "But let's talk about who's really been taking." Ethan scoffed, leaning against the wall, but his fingers twitched, betraying his unease. I looked at Mom, her lips pursed, and kept going. "I paid your mortgage for years, Mom. Your spa trips, your car payments, my money. Ethan, your businesses, your car repairs, your debts, all me." My voice rose slightly, but I kept it controlled, each word deliberate. "I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing. No thanks, no respect, just demands." Mom's face flushed, her hands clenching her arms, but she didn't interrupt. Ethan's smirk was gone, his eyes darting to the floor. I pulled the contract from my bag, holding it up but not opening it. "Today, I closed a deal that's changing my life," I said, my gaze shifting between them. "Not because of you, but despite you. You don't get to claim me anymore." Dad shifted, his mouth opening, but no words came. Mom stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You think you're better than us now?" I met her eyes, unflinching. "No, Mom, I just know I'm not your bank." The room was silent, the clock ticking in the background. Ethan muttered, "You're exaggerating," but it was weak, his shoulders slumping. I shook my head, almost laughing. "Exaggerating? I have the bank statements. Want to see?" They didn't answer. I slung my bag over my shoulder, the contract tucked away, and walked to the door. "You disowned me," I said, pausing with my hand on the knob. "But I'm the one cutting you off. Don't call me, don't text, we're done." I stepped outside, the door closing softly behind me. My chest felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried for years. I got in my car, the engine roaring to life, and drove away, their stunned faces fading in the rear view. The flame inside me burned steady now, not with anger, but with power. I was free. The city lights glowed softly as I drove away from my parents' house, the weight of my words to them still settling in my chest. My hands were steady on the wheel, the contract in my bag, a quiet reminder of the life I'd built, but the adrenaline from confronting them was fading, leaving a hollow ache. I didn't want to go home to my empty apartment, not yet. Instead, I turned toward the one place I knew I'd find warmth. Lila's house, my best friend since high school, where my chosen family was waiting. As I pulled into her driveway, the porch light flickered on and I felt my shoulders relax, the flame inside me softening into something gentler. Lila opened the door before I could knock, her smile wide, her curly hair spilling over a cozy sweater. "Mel, you look like you just fought a dragon," she said, pulling me into a hug. I laughed, the sound surprising me, and hugged her back, her warmth chasing away the chill of the dinner. Inside, her living room was alive. Her husband, Sam, was setting out snacks, and our friend Priya was sprawled on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. The air smelled of popcorn and cedar candles, a stark contrast to the sterile tension of my parents' dining room. I dropped my bag by the door, my fingers brushing the strap, and sank into an armchair, the cushions swallowing me. "Spill," Lila said, handing me a mug of tea, her eyes sharp but kind. I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me, and started talking. My voice was low at first, recounting Mom's ultimatum, Ethan's smirk, the way Dad's silence cut deeper than words. My hands wrapped around the mug, my thumbs tracing the handle as I described walking out, then going back to call them out. Lila's eyes widened when I mentioned the real estate deal, and Sam let out a low whistle. "You're a badass, Mel," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. Priya raised her glass. "To Melissa, who just burned the house down, metaphorically, of course." I laughed again, my chest loosening. This was what family should feel like. No judgment, no demands, just people who saw me. I set the mug down, my fingers lingering on the warm ceramic, and looked around. Lila was curled up on the couch, her eyes soft as she listened. Sam was nodding, his usual goofy grin replaced with something prouder. Priya, always the skeptic, was watching me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You really told them off?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. I nodded, my lips twitching into a smile. "Yeah," and I meant every word. We talked late into the night, the conversation flowing like the wine Priya kept pouring. They didn't just hear me, they celebrated me. Lila asked about the deal, her hands gesturing excitedly as I explained the doubled funding, the portfolio I was building. Sam joked about me becoming a real estate mogul, his hands mimicking a crown on my head. And I swatted him playfully, my laughter genuine. Priya shared her own story of cutting off a toxic ex, her fingers twisting a napkin as she spoke, and I felt a kinship, a shared strength. These were my people, the ones who didn't see me as a resource, but as Melissa. As the night wound down, Lila reached over, squeezing my hand. "You're free now," she said, her voice quiet but sure. I squeezed back, my throat tight, and nodded. The contrast was stark, my parents' cold dismissal versus this warmth, this acceptance. My fingers brushed the armrest, grounding me in the moment. I wasn't just surviving their rejection, I was thriving because of it. The flame inside me wasn't about anger anymore, it was about belonging, here, with people who chose me back. I left Lila's house close to midnight, my steps light as I walked to my car. The night air was crisp, but I didn't feel cold. I had my chosen family, my deal, my future, and that was more than enough. The morning sun filtered through my apartment's blinds, casting stripes across my kitchen table where I sat, coffee mug in hand, staring at my phone. It had been a week since I'd walked out of my parents' house for good, my words to them, "Don't call me, don't text, we're done," still ringing in my ears. The real estate deal was moving forward, my inbox buzzing with emails from Sarah about next steps, but my family wasn't done trying to claw me back. My phone lit up with another text from Ethan. "House is in trouble, you gonna let us lose it?" My thumb hovered over the screen, my jaw tightening, but I set the phone down untouched. This was the moment to set boundaries, to build a fortress around the life I'd fought for, and I wasn't letting them breach it. I leaned back, my fingers tapping the mug's handle, and let the memories of their guilt trips flood in. Mom's voicemails had started the day after the dinner, her voice a mix of sugar and venom. "Melissa, we're family. You can't just abandon us." Ethan's texts were blunter, accusing me of turning my back on them, as if I owed them my soul. My hand tightened around the mug, the ceramic warm against my palm. I knew their game. They were panicking because the bank had sent a foreclosure notice. I'd seen the letter in their mail pile during the dinner, ignored among Ethan's takeout receipts. They'd burned through my last payment, and now they were scrambling. I stood, pacing the small kitchen, my socks scuffing the linoleum. My laptop was open on the counter, showing my bank account. Healthy, growing, mine. I'd spent years funneling money to them, but no more. My fingers brushed the counter's edge as I stopped, staring at the phone again. Another text, this time from Mom. "We need to talk. You owe us that." Owe them? The word made my stomach twist, but I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my contacts, my thumb scrolling to Ethan's name. My heart thudded, a mix of guilt and resolve, as I hit block. The screen confirmed it, and I exhaled, the weight in my chest lightening slightly. Mom's number was next. My finger hesitated, trembling, but I pressed it, her name vanishing from my notifications. The silence that followed was deafening, but freeing. I sank back into my chair, my hands wrapping around the mug again, the coffee now lukewarm. Blocking them wasn't just about stopping their texts, it was a line in the sand. I pictured their house, the one I'd kept afloat, now crumbling under their mismanagement. Part of me, the old Melissa, felt a pang. My childhood home, the backyard where I'd played, the kitchen where I'd handed over my paychecks. But that pang was drowned by the truth. They'd never seen me as family, only as a resource. My lips pressed together, my eyes stinging, but I didn't cry. I was done grieving for them. I opened my laptop, pulling up the real estate group's latest email. Sarah had sent projections for 3 new properties, each one a step toward the portfolio I'd dreamed of. My fingers moved over the keyboard, drafting a reply, my focus sharp. This was my life now, my work, my goals, my future. The phone stayed quiet, no more buzzes to interrupt me. I glanced at it, half expecting a new number to pop up, but it didn't. I'd blocked their main lines, and if they tried others, I'd block those too. My hand rested on the laptop, steady now, as I typed. Later that day, Leela called, her voice bright through the phone. "How you holding up, Mel?" she asked. I leaned against the counter, my free hand tracing the edge of a spoon. "Better," I said, and meant it. I told her about blocking them, and she cheered, her laugh like a balm. "You're building a fortress, girl," she said. I smiled, my shoulders relaxing. A fortress. That's exactly what it was, a boundary to protect the life I'd earned. By evening, I was back at my table, papers spread out, planning my next move. The phone stayed silent, and for the first time in years, I felt unburdened. They could keep their guilt. I had my freedom. The morning light spilled across my desk, illuminating the spreadsheets and property listings I'd been poring over since dawn. My coffee mug sat empty, a faint ring of grounds at the bottom, as I jotted notes on a legal pad, my pen moving with purpose. It had been 2 weeks since I'd blocked Mom and Ethan, and the silence from them was a strange kind of peace, like the calm after a storm. My real estate deal was in full swing. The doubled funding opening doors to new properties, and I was determined to use this momentum to redefine myself, not just as Melissa the ex-wallet, but as Melissa Bailey, someone who could leave a mark on her own terms. Today, I was meeting with a local nonprofit to discuss a project that felt bigger than me, and it was time to reclaim my family name for something good. I stood, stretching my arms, my fingers brushing the ceiling of my small apartment. The nonprofit, Homes for Hope, focused on affordable housing, and they'd reached out after hearing about my duplex success. They wanted me to consult on a project to renovate low-income units, using my financial skills to maximize their budget. I'd spent days preparing, my table buried under cost estimates and grant applications, my laptop humming late into the night. My hands had trembled when I first read their email, not from nerves but from excitement. This was a chance to build something meaningful, to turn my pain into purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing a blazer that felt like armor, my fingers smoothing the lapels as I checked the mirror. The girl staring back wasn't the hunched-over Melissa from family dinners, the one who'd twisted napkins under the table to hide her hurt. She was someone new, steady, focused, proud. I grabbed my portfolio, the pages crisp with my projections, and headed out, my boots clicking on the stairs. The drive to the nonprofit's office was quick, the city waking up around me, and I felt a surge of clarity. This was my legacy, not the Bailey name tied to Mom's demands or Ethan's failures, but one I'd forged myself. At the meeting, I sat across from the nonprofit's director, Carla, her warm smile putting me at ease. The room was small, cluttered with files and community flyers, but it felt alive, purposeful. I walked them through my plan, my voice steady as I pointed to charts, my fingers tracing the numbers I'd crunched. With strategic investments and grant leveraging, we can renovate 20 units this year, I said, my pen tapping the page for emphasis. Carla nodded, her eyes bright, and asked sharp questions that I answered with confidence. My hands moved naturally, gesturing as I spoke, no longer clenched in defense. When I mentioned my background, years of managing finances under pressure, Carla leaned forward, her hands clasped. "You've got a gift, Melissa," she said. "Not just for numbers, but for making them mean something." My throat tightened, and I nodded, my fingers brushing the portfolio's edge. It was the kind of validation I'd never gotten at home, and it hit deep. We wrapped up with a handshake, her grip firm, and a plan to start next month. As I left, my steps felt lighter, like I was carrying something new, a purpose that wasn't tied to anyone else's needs. Back home, I sat at my table, the nonprofit's contract beside my real estate papers. My fingers traced the nonprofit's logo, a simple house with a heart. And I thought about my family. They'd defined the Bailey name as obligation, as a chain, but I was redefining it as generosity, as impact. I wasn't just building properties, I was building a legacy that reflected who I was, not who they wanted me to be. My eyes drifted to the photo frame on my shelf, still face down from the night I'd decided to stop carrying their weight. I stood, my fingers hesitating before flipping it upright. The old picnic photo, me, Mom, Dad, Ethan, stared back, but it didn't hurt like it used to. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one hunched under their expectations. I set the frame back gently, my hands steady, and returned to my desk. The nonprofit project was personal in a way I hadn't expected. Growing up, I'd seen families like mine, struggling, stretched thin, leaning on one person to hold it all together. I'd been that person, and I knew the toll it took. Now I could help others avoid that trap, giving them homes they could afford without sacrificing their dreams. My pen scratched across the legal pad listing next steps: meet with contractors, finalize grants, visit the first site. Each task felt like a brick in the foundation of my new life, solid and unshakable. I thought back to the dinner, to Mom's cold get out and Ethan's smirk, and realized something. Their rejection had freed me to do this. Without their demands, I had space to breathe, to create. My fingers paused on the pen, a small smile tugging at my lips. They'd tried to erase me, but I was writing my own story now. The Bailey name wasn't theirs anymore, it was mine, tied to homes for families who needed them, to a future I'd chosen. By evening, I was on a call with Lila, my phone propped on the counter as I chopped vegetables for dinner. "You sound different," she said, her voice warm through the speaker, lighter. I laughed, my knife pausing mid-carrot. "I feel it," I said, my hands moving again, the rhythm soothing. I told her about the nonprofit, the meeting, the way Carla's words had settled in my chest. Leela cheered, her excitement infectious. "You're out here changing lives, Mel," she said. I smiled, my eyes stinging, but not from sadness. For the first time I felt like I was enough. As I hung up, I glanced at my laptop, the nonprofit's contract glowing on the screen. My family had tried to define me as a resource, but I was so much more. A builder, a helper, a woman who could stand tall. I set the knife down, my hands resting on the counter, and took a deep breath. This was my legacy, and I was just getting started. The evening sun cast a warm glow through my apartment window, painting the walls golden as I sat on my couch, a notebook open in my lap. My pen rested idle, my fingers tracing the edge of the page where I'd jotted ideas for the nonprofit project. It had been a month since I'd walked away from my family for good, since I'd blocked their numbers and chosen myself. The silence from them was complete now. No texts, no calls, no guilt trips. My apartment felt different, quieter, like a space that was truly mine. As I leaned back, my eyes drifting to the ceiling, I reflected on everything. The dinners, the rejection, the deals, and realized I'd found something I hadn't dared hope for. Peace, rooted in knowing my worth wasn't tied to their approval. I thought back to the girl I used to be, the one who'd twist napkins under the table, swallowing hurt to keep the peace. She felt like a stranger now. My hands, once clenched in frustration, were relaxed, resting on the notebook's open pages. I remembered the night I drove away from their house, Mom's "get out" echoing, Ethan's smirk burning. That night, I'd thought freedom meant escaping their demands. But it was more than that. It was seeing myself clearly, not as their wallet or their failure, but as Melissa, smart, capable, enough. My lips curved into a small smile, my chest light, like I'd finally exhaled a breath I'd been holding for years. The nonprofit project had become my anchor. Yesterday I'd visited the first renovation site, a run-down apartment complex with chipped paint and cracked windows. Standing there, my boots crunching on gravel, I'd felt a surge of purpose. Carla had walked beside me, pointing out where new walls would go, her hands gesturing with excitement. I'd nodded, my pen scratching notes, my mind already calculating budgets. Helping families find stable homes wasn't just work, it was healing, a way to rewrite the story of my own unstable childhood. My fingers brushed the notebook now, the memory grounding me. I thought about Lila's living room, the warmth of her hug, Sam's goofy grin, Priya's raised glass. They'd shown me what family could be, people who saw me, not what I could give. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent but for a text from Leela. "Proud of you, Mel." I smiled, my thumb brushing the screen, and typed back a quick heart emoji. That was enough. I didn't need Mom's praise or Ethan's approval. I had people who chose me, and I chose myself. The real estate portfolio was growing too. Sarah had emailed this morning confirming another property closing next week. I'd built that from nothing, from late nights and ramen dinners, from refusing to let their demands define me. My hands flipped the notebook closed, the sound soft but final. I wasn't proving anything to them anymore. I was proving it to myself. The Bailey name, once a chain, was now a banner I carried with pride, tied to homes I'd helped build, to lives I'd touched. I stood, stretching, my arms reaching toward the ceiling. The apartment was small, but it felt vast, filled with possibility. I walked to the window, my fingers brushing the sill, and looked out at the city lights blinking to life. Peace wasn't loud or flashy, it was this quiet certainty, this knowing I was enough. I'd spent years chasing their validation, but I didn't need it. I never had. Have you ever had to walk away from people who didn't see your worth? I know how hard it is to choose yourself, to let go of those ties. But standing here now, I can tell you, it's worth it. If my journey resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story, where you found your strength. I'm reading every one, and I'm rooting for you. You don't need anyone's permission to be enough. You already are.